subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update. Join the only official Telegram channel of Rao's IAS Study Circle to get relevant material and important updates.
Hello everyone and welcome to Daily News Simplified, your one-stop solution to detailed analysis of current affairs which are published in the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper and are equally relevant for your UPSC preparations. Articles dated 23rd of June 2022 are listed on your screen, and the time stamping for these articles is already given in the description box. So let us begin with the first article for the day. Here is your weekly assignment for mains answer writing. The question says that what are marine heat waves? How marine heat waves in Bay of Bengal region impacted India's weather pattern? You have to answer this question in 150 words and submit it before Saturday to get this answer evaluated by the dedicated team of evaluators at Rao's IAS. The link to the question is already given in the description box. Follow the link and do submit your answer as soon as possible.
QIP is actually what you want for the exam.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are already there.
Yes.
But what is needed for the exam is what the QIP is giving you. QIP is actually quality improvement because I owe my success to it.
तो रैंकर्स बैच हैज़ चेंज. आई थिंक मेरी रैंक आई है बिकॉज ऑफ द रैंकर्स बैच. तो रैंकर्स बैच ज्वाइन करने के बाद आई थिंक मेरी वो टेंशन ख़त्म हो गई थी. एक कांस्टेंट गाइडेंस थी मेरे पास कि मुझे क्या पढ़ना है, कैसे पढ़ना है, कितने टेस्ट लिखने हैं. टेस्ट इवैल्यूएट करने में सर ने बहुत हेल्प की. एक एक टेस्ट के बाद सर और मैं बैठ के डिस्कस करते थे एक एक आंसर इनफैक्ट कि इस आंसर में कौन सा एग्जाम्पल गलत था या सही था, कैसे उसको इम्प्रूव करें.
मेंटर तो राउज में मतलब अलग ही लेवल में मेंटरशिप मिली थी. अभिषेक सर मेरे मेंटोर थे.
अच्छा.
तो ओवरऑल मेरे को काफ़ी वार्म सा सपोर्टिव सा एनवायरनमेंट मिला था राउज से और मेरे को काफ़ी अच्छा लगा था.
Okay.
So as you heard it from the toppers, how the QIP program helped them in acing this year's examination. Now the prelims result is already out and you might be wondering how to prepare in the next 3 months for this year's mains examination. The basic question that might be coming in your mind is that what are the key components of the QIP program? Let us listen it from Vaibhav sir.
Yes. So there are three very important elements of QIP Mains. The first is of course the revision cum answer writing practice classes, for which the notes shall be provided in the form of Compass Maxi. Then the second important element of Mains QIP is the Mains test series, which will include very intensive feedback and evaluation. And then the third and the most important element of QIP Mains is mentorship. And I think no one is better than you, Mangal sir, to throw some light on mentorship program.
Mentorship is important to declutter the process of this examination. We are going to handhold you to give you personalized solutions to your problems, be it answer writing, be it understanding the topics and also understanding the pace at which you are preparing for this examination. Also, there are certain specific areas which require improvements like essay writing, ethics answer writing and also answer writing for the general studies papers 1, 2 and 3. And that is why this personalized feedback and handholding is going to do wonders as it did for this year's toppers for the 2021.
So for those who have cleared the prelims examination, first and foremost, congratulations. And secondly, there is a link in the description of the video, which you can click, which will take you to submit a form. And after submitting that form, we are going to contact you. So do fill out this form by clicking the link in the description of the video. And all the best for Mains 2022.
All the best.
This article of the Hindu newspaper appeared on page number 6 and talks about some of the suggestions as highlighted by the writer regarding the development and improvement of health sector in India. The writer has highlighted that the digitization of national health record or the improvement of the digital repository of health or of the patients and doctors in the country is relevant. However, it comes with certain limitations. The writer has also highlighted the relevance of medical tourism for a country like India And should medical tourism take the front seat, or there should be certain restrictions in this regard? So let us analyze the article and try to learn some mains related pointers from this article. As health sector is an important topic, it is a multi-dimensional topic, so it can be asked in your general studies paper 1 under Indian society. Health can also be asked under general studies paper 2, where it is as a topic is mentioned. It can also be asked in your general studies paper 3 under the infrastructure category, and it is also relevant for your essay as well as ethics paper. So as we have said that health sector and the health is an important multidimensional topic for your UPSC examination apart from the education and water. So paying special attention to such kind of article is relevant for you. Now through this slide, we'd like to analyze what article has to say or what author has to offer. The article talks about the important background. It says that Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, which talks about creating a digital repository of the medical services and medical professionals in the country in order to provide a one-stop solution to a national level health requirements. Apart from this mission, Health by India calls for online repository of health related data. Now, writer has argued that these two important missions will help the external stakeholders, that is foreigners, to find the right match for their important medical needs. Now the point is that if we are meeting the requirement of external stakeholders, we won't be able to justify the demand of internal stakeholders, that is Indian citizens. Apart from that, article has highlighted that the 15th Finance Commission called for utilizing the fuller capacity at the district and the sub-district level, which simply means that the focus of digitization should shift from national level digitization to the district and sub-district level digitization, along with training of the medical professionals. In the same regard, World Health Organization previously said that India requires around 2 million doctors and nurses to cater the need of rising population's health issues. However, WHO has also highlighted that the current growth of the number of doctors, paramedics and nurses will not even help India to meet its target even in the next 8 years, that is by 2030, which is surely going to prove that India will miss on the SDG timelines and SDG targets with respect to the health sector. Now, the article has highlighted 5 important issues faced by the health sector. So if you have certain issues already written in your notes, you can add these 5 sector related issues over there in order to get more diversification. The first issue highlighted in the article is that there is a skewed skill mix among the professionals. So some doctors are very highly qualified, the others are not. Some paramedics have high level of experience in terms of their service provision, others don't. There is a large chunk of inactive professionals, especially in the rural areas. Then we have the out-migration of the important health professionals, that is the brain drain. So students who have studied medicines in India are moving outside India in order to practice. So that creates a real-time lack or the supply crunch of paramedics and medical professionals in India. Then we have the digital repository, that is Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, is actually working at the national level and not at the state level. So this brings us to an important point that creating a national level database will not help to cater the demand which are creating or which have been created at the local level. So government has to look into this matter as soon as possible. Then the last issue highlighted in the article is that medical tourism has impacted the health cost in the country. Now understand this in a simpler terms. A person who has come from the United States, let's say from the European nation or even from the East Asian rich countries, that person will have higher per capita income and can afford a very expensive, with respect to Indian economy, a very expensive health service. So that health service has now catered to these people have raised the overall cost of the health. And Indian citizens who are demanding the same quality of service, same quality of health requirement, now have to pay almost similar price to these hospitals or the medical professionals. So these are the important issues that has been highlighted. Previously in 1995, when General Agreement on Trade in Services was signed under World Trade Organization, nations came together in order to create a scope for the cross-border trade in medical services. That simply means that doctors, professionals from US, Europe will come to India, can easily come to India and cater the demand of India. Indian professionals can go across the border. This not only includes the services, even goods could easily transfer across the border. Now the point is that the biggest advantage taken because of this GATS agreement was taken by the rich developed nations such as European Union countries as well as Canada. So they have taken the more advantage vis-a-vis what India has done. Now the solution of this article says that the National Digital Repository which was created previously by the government should work and focus on district and sub-district level. So people who are living in a sub-district, we can take any example. Let's say there's a sub-district with the name Kishangarh in the district of Ajmer, Rajasthan. Now people who have already assigned their data, hospitals who have already assigned their data on a sub-district level in Kishangarh can easily cater the requirement of the patients who are living in the Kishangarh. So a patient who is living in a Kishangarh will not require to go to another part of the country, other extreme of the country in order to get treatment. So they can get all the easily digitized services in their nearby. So this is the most important crux of the article, that the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission should focus on collecting and disseminating the digital data at district and sub-district level. With this discussion place, let us now move to the next article for the day. This article of the Hindu newspaper appeared on page number 1st and talks about an important national cultural event known by the name Rath Yatra in Jagannath Temple of Puri. Now Puri is situated in the state of Odisha, and this Jagannath Temple Rath Yatra is an auspicious event which is organized each year. Now from the perspective of UPSC, if you go through the recent prelim examination, a question was asked with respect to the Somnath Temple and the options given were quite complex, which proves that UPSC now has been asking questions with respect to the temples, that too in the current affairs. So current affairs related history has now taken a front seat in UPSC's prelim examination because two important questions were asked in this regard. Now answer to this question was straightforward. The answer of this Somnath Temple question was option A, because it was not President Radhakrishnan who visited this temple. So taking the same trend as temple architecture is important for your prelim examination as well as your mains examination in GS paper 1 history, we'll talk about the Jagannath Temple and the important dynasties attached to this particular area. Now Jagannath Temple is a Hindu temple belonging to the medieval Indian history from eastern part of Indian subcontinent. It is dedicated to Lord Vishnu, that is, it is based on the Vaishnavite culture of temple. It is located in the Puri area or the Puri coast of Odisha as a state. It shows the Kalinga temple architecture. Now in Kalinga temple architecture, two important things are there. The first one is Deol architecture, which is also known as the Vimana. The second thing which is important in this architecture design is the relevance of Jagmohana. Well, we will talk about both these important elements in much detail. This temple was first patronized and constructed under the Gang dynasty or Eastern Gang dynasty, and the king who was responsible was Anantvarman Chonganga. And this temple was actually began constructing in 12th century AD. Later on, this temple was renovated by Gajapati dynasty. Now, Gajapati dynasty was also asked by UPSC in the prelim examination this year. So here also it is important. The source which tells us about the patronage of this temple comes from the Kendupatna copper plate, in which it was written that the temple was patronized by the Eastern Gang dynasty. The other important pointers with respect to temples are: the Puri temple is forming one of the temple of the Char Dham concept under Hinduism. Now, Char Dham concept simply proves that there are 4 important temples in north, south, east and west, which forms the important aspect of Hindu pilgrimage. On the eastern side we have Puri, on southern side we have Rameshwaram, on western side we have Dwarika, and on northern side we have Badrinath. The temple of Jagannath is known for the Lord Jagannath, which is also taken as one of the form of Lord Vishnu and Krishna. Apart from Lord Krishna, his elder brother Balbhadra and sister Subhadra are taken as a trio of deities who are worshipped, and their idols which are made up of wood. So wood is a unique feature in this temple. So wooden idols are taken up for a Yath Yatra. Aurangzeb, that is the last highly influential Mughal ruler, actually ordered to close down the temple. However, after the death of Aurangzeb, the temple was reopened. Madhavacharya, Adi Shankara, Guru Nanak, Kabir, Tulsidas, Ramanujacharya, Shankara Dev, Nimbaracharya visited this temple. Adi Shankara established one of the Govardhan Mutt. Mutt is a monastery. So he established a Govardhan Mutt near this temple. So this is also relevant from the perspective of prelim examination. As far as Rath Yatra is concerned, so Rath Yatra of Jagannath Puri temple is also known by the name Gundicha Yatra. This yatra is conducted once in a month of Ashad. The current month of Hindu calendar is Ashad. It is a rainy season of Odisha, which usually falls in the month of June or July. The deities or the 3 important siblings are brought onto a Bada Danda, that is a main street of Puri. They are travelled for 3 kilometers to Sri Gondicha temple. That is the reason why it is also known as Gondicha Yatra. And these 3 idols of these 3 siblings are taken on a huge chariot made up of wood. And these chariots are known as Rath. Public view is allowed as a darshan, which is also considered as a holy practice. Now, if we come and talk about the East Gang rulers and Anant Varman Chaundgang. Originally, Anant Gang was a Shaivite, but later on he became a Vaishnavite and he conquered the Utkal region. Now, Utkal region is a Puri region or the eastern part of Odisha. Eastern Gang dynasty belonged to 11th to 15th century AD. Their capitals were Dantpuram, Kalingnagar and Kataka. Kataka is currently known by the name Katak. The founder of Eastern Gang dynasty was Anantvarman Vajrahast. The other important ruler of this dynasty was Narsimhadev, who was also known to build the important World Heritage Site known by the name Konark Sun Temple. The last ruler of this dynasty was Bhanudev, and dynasty actually came to an end in 1434. After this, the next dynasty which came to this area was Gajapati dynasty. The important point to be noted is that Eastern Gang, which was highlighted in the article, is different from the Western Gang dynasty. Western Gang dynasty actually ruled from the area of northern Karnataka. So you should not be confused between Eastern Gang and the Western Gang in this regard. Now, before going to the last part of this article, let's also talk about the important aspects of architecture in the Kalinga style of temple. In the Kalinga style of temple, you can easily see that there is a curvilinear shikhar which is known by the name Rekha Dwal. In this curvilinear architecture, we have the topmost structure to be Kalash, which is the inverted pot. Then we have the rounded cylindrical part which is known as Amalik. The rest of the part is your Shikhar or Viman. The lowest part of the temple is Pista, which is also the platform on which the entire temple is constructed. It is at a little bit higher position. The Jagmohana, which is also the second most important part of this Kaling architecture, is also known by the name Pidda Jagmohana. Pidda Jagmohana is nothing but a kind of mandapa where important aspects or functions of a temple is conducted. It has Ghant as the topmost part and Pidda as the lower portion. With this discussion in place, let us now move towards the important question attached to this article. So this would be your question number 1. Do try to solve this question and comment your answer in the comment box. Let us now move to the next article for the day. This article appeared on page 1st of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper and talks about the discovery of new corals in Indian water. Scientists in India have found and recorded 4 important species of coral for the first time in Indian water. And these species belongs to the azooantheles corals. We'll talk about the azooantheline corals in much detail, but before that, let us look into the relevance of this topic. Now, corals are as a topic very important for your UPSC pre as well as mains examination. In the prelims examination, they have asked the question related to the coral reefs twice. In 2018, they have asked about the important distribution and types of corals across the world. And even in the mains examination in 2019, in General Studies paper 1, where corals would form the part of geographical distribution of natural resources. In this, they have asked about to assess the impact of global warming on coral life along with examples. So from the perspective of General Studies paper 1 and General Studies paper 3 in your mains examinations along with your prelim examination, coral and coral reefs are extremely important. So before venturing into the details of coral, let us talk about the important findings of azooanthelid corals. Now normally when you will read about zooantheles. Azooanthelene simply means something which is anti or which is against or which is reverse in the case. So azooanthely corals are a group of corals that do not contain the zooanthely and derive their nourishments or their food not from the sun but by capturing the different form of planktons. Now why they are not capturing it from the sun? Because they are deeper corals. They are up to 1000 meter deep. And you know that sun rays do not penetrate up to 1000 meters in the water. So corals which are shallow in depth, which are mostly found in the continental slope or continental shelf, are mostly zooanthely. And if they are away from the sunlight and they are depending on the nearby planktons to survive, and not on the sun rays, they are forming the part of azooanthelene corals. All 4 corals which were found in India belongs to the flabellate family. They are hard corals and they are found in a solitary status, that is, they are not found in a colony structure. And they have very highly compressed structure of their skeleton. The reason being simple, that they have a very high pressure of water over them. And the last one is, as they are living in the solitary position, they do not form the coral reefs, or they are non-reef building species. So this is what you have to remember for the prelim examination. Now beyond this, we will also go into the deeper of corals. So we'll talk about the conditions for coral. We'll talk about Great Barrier Reef. We'll talk about decay of coral or coral bleaching, and then we will also talk about the distribution of coral across the world. So let's begin the first one. When it comes to the geographical conditions which are required for the coral growth, these are as follows. They grow best in the brightly lighted water, so deep corals are very rare. So they are grown mostly in the depth of 5 to 10 meters. And the suspended particles interferes with feeding. So those small dust particles, if they are very large in numbers, they will reduce the growth of the corals. The coral reef can grow up to the depth of 90 meters, not beyond than that. However, the sun rays may go even beyond that. But the growth rate declines rapidly after 5 to 10 meters because high growth rate is possible when the bright sunlight insolation is available and the water is clean. So the reef building corals are found within 21 degree of isotherm. So isotherm, you all know, is a dedicated line which passes through those points on the globe which have similar temperature conditions. So let's say some place here in Siberia has, let's say, -20. This place in Bering Strait has -20, and here in, let's say, Canada has -20. So isotherm will pass from these places in this manner. So corals will grow in those areas which have isotherm of 21 degrees Celsius, and temperature below 18 degrees causes their death. Next being that coral form in calm and well lit water, so they are not near the mouth of the rivers, because mouth of the rivers have high volume of water, that too with high sedimentation and high speed. Individual coral organisms are however found in some cold high latitude waters, but they do not form reefs, or they do not form large area of colonies. As you can see in this map, most of the coral reefs are situated in the areas which are plus minus 25 degrees of your equator. So they are mostly tropical in sense. When it comes to the Great Barrier Reef, it is a complex of coral reefs. I've already discussed they are found in Australia in the form of colonies. So they are complex coral reefs, shoals and islands in the Pacific Ocean off the northeastern coast of Australia. As you can see over here, the orange color shows the Great Barrier Reef, which is in the northeast direction of Australia. This small island is your Tasmania, which is also part of Australia. Over here you have New Zealand, and in the northern side you have Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia. The Great Barrier Reef extends in roughly northwest to southeast direction and covers an area of about 135,000 square miles. With that size, it is sometimes characterized as the largest structure ever built by a living creatures, and those are not the humans. Apart from this, the conditions which are required for the coral formation in Great Barrier Reefs are as follows. The water environment of the Great Barrier Reef is formed by the surface layer of the southwestern Pacific Ocean. So the cold water or the cold streams are rare in these areas. Apart from this, El Nino and Southern Oscillation, or in fact La Nina, also plays their respective role in regulating the temperature of this area. The reef water shows little seasonal variation, so the temperature of the water is very moderate. And the last being that water are generally crystal clear, which is required for good growth, with submarine features clearly visible up to 30 meters. So the requirement was 10 meters and you have a good visibility up to 30 meters. So it is a best place for a coral growth. When it comes to the distribution or the types, coral reefs are classified into three main types. First is your fringing reefs, which grow close to the shore of a landmass, extending out like a submerged platform. So if this is your coast and this is your water, so fringing reef, they will grow closer to the coast out like a submerged platform. So it is like a submerged platform in the water. The second being your barrier reef, which also follows a coastline but are separated by it via wide expanse of water. So if you separate the coast and the reef, you will get barrier reef. So it acts like a barrier. And the last one being the atoll, which are ring-shaped reefs surrounding lagoons. Now the issue comes that how these corals who have been formed at a particular location under a particular condition are getting bleached. So how coral become bleached? So the first condition, well, this is a healthy coral. Alright, so healthy coral, they are coated with an algae-like substance known as zooxanthellae. And coral depend on this to survive. So for the dependence, for the survival of corals, we require zooxanthellae. So what happens? Once this bleaching starts, a coral becomes stressed. So when coral becomes to stress from changes in its environment, the zooxanthellae can become toxic and leave the coral. So when the temperature start rising, when there is lots and lots of mud, or when there is influx of polluted water and other reasons which we will discuss very shortly, corals become stressed, and this relationship, this symbiotic relationship is disturbed. After this, the coral start bleaching, and once the zooxanthellae have left the corals, the coral turns white, leaving vulnerable to starvation, disease and even death. So now you can see from orange color to the light yellow color, now they are turned into white one. And once they are under the severe stress, they ultimately die in the colors which is given in this photograph. Now these are the basic causes of coral bleaching. The first one is increase of the sea water temperature. So you can take any example. Let's say there is El Nino, there is climate change. All they can create coral bleaching. Then we have changes in the seawater chemistry due to ocean acidification that can damage or that can increase the stress on the corals. Next being the chemicals in the sunscreen, which was recently banned in many of the island nations in the Pacific, and other personal care products which have high degree of chemicals and they causes acidification and lead to bleaching. Next being the increment of the level of sediments in the water or the coral exposure to the sodium cyanide, a chemical which is used to capture of coral reef fishes. So the fishing activity is also hampering the development of the coral in these areas. Next being, of course, your mining and the burning of the coal pollutes the atmosphere, causes the global warming. So global warming along with the seawater temperature is the most core issue of coral bleaching. The next being your deep water trawling, and they involve dragging of the fishing nets which actually uproots the corals. And the last one being your billions of bits of plastic waste are entangled in the coral, and this retards the development or the growth of corals along with their symbiotic relationship. Now, as I was talking about an important question, these are the areas of the corals developed in India. Well, they are developed in Gulf of Kutch. They are in the coast of Maharashtra and Goa. They are definitely found in the Lakshadweep, where most of the islands are coral islands. They are also found in Gulf of Mannar and Pak Bay, and ultimately they are found in Andaman and Nicobar. When it comes to the eastern coast, the growth of coral is very, very retarded. We do not have that. The first and the foremost or the topmost reason being there is large number of rivers with high inflow of sedimentation, which actually reduces the growth of corals. So no clear water, no good growth of the corals. So instead of corals, the eastern side have large number of mangroves. And now we come the final point where we will talk about the efforts which have been taken in globally and at the India level. So at global stage, we have Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network and International Coral Reef Initiative. Apart from this, we have National Oceanic and Atmosphere Administration, and all of them are working to prevent the damage of healthy reefs and restore the damaged ones. When it comes to India, well, we have coastal regulation zones which were amended recently. We have Wildlife Protection Act as well. Apart from that, we have created many marine protected areas. We have also created many biosphere reserve, and the most important one being Gulf of Mannar, where we are also focusing on the protection of reef. And recently there was a case of biorocks where artificial growing of corals were undertaken. So with this, now I'll take you to the important question which is attached to this article. This article appeared on page number 14 of the Hindu newspaper and talks about the depreciation of Indian rupee and touching a new low of 78.32 rupees per dollar. And along with this, an article also talks about the falling Sensex at 1.4%. Now, as far as Sensex and its trend are concerned, it is not relevant for the UPSC. However, depreciation of rupee is important. Now, we'll talk about two important aspects. The first one is that why Indian rupee is falling and what will be the impact of falling Indian rupee. The first one is that why Indian rupee is falling. The topmost reason being that India has a managed floating exchange rate structure or system. It simply means that floating where the currency is freely exchanged at market forces of demand and supply. It simply means that government will not intervene, government will not fix any particular rate of its currency, and currency's demand and supply together will determine the floating rate or the changing rate. Then what is managed? Managed here simply means that if a currency goes out of control or if it depreciate or appreciate too much, RBI will have power to intervene. So Government will allow the currency to move freely, but if it go out of control, RBI is there to manage the currency. That is the reason why India is following a managed floating exchange rate. Now, as India is following the floating exchange rate system, India's currency is now being determined by the demand and supply, and that is the reason why India is going through a high degree of currency fluctuation. The second reason being that India's per capita income is rising. That is the reason why rupee is in demand more than that of the dollar. And as rupee is demanded more, the quantity of rupee has increased vis-a-vis the dollar. And once the quantity of rupee has increased, it will depreciate further. Then comes the mismatch in the rupee dollar demand and supply in the international market. We are going through the global fluctuation with respect to oil and food trade. And as the trade is fluctuating, so is the Indian currency. And lastly is the weak Asian market. So Indian exports are weak. Indian imports are more. When imports are more than exports, it simply means that the demand of rupee will be more. More demand of rupee means more supply of rupee, and more supply of rupee simply means that there is depreciation of Indian currency. Now coming to the impact of depreciation. The first impact is that as the depreciation is there, so $1 will be more expensive in Indian rupee. So if you have to buy something from outside the country, you will have to pay more rupee. So imports will become expensive. Now when imports are expensive, the reverse will be applicable on exports. So exports will become cheaper in other nations. So other countries will be able to buy Indian products in cheaper price. Then if imports are more than exports, it simply means that there will be trade deficit which will widen further. If you go through the basic NCERT of economics, you will find that this formula is based on the measurement of GDP, and X minus M shows the trade account. So if exports are more than imports, then it's okay. But if imports are more than exports, as in the case of India, further depreciation will lead to the fall in the GDP, because this aspect or X minus M will become very highly negative with respect to the other components. Then we have the currency outflow. So once the Indian rupee is more expensive, the people who have already invested in Indian economy will take out their money and will invest in other market. The next result would be that imported inflation would be there in India. Now as import is more expensive, but India has to import oil and gold. Now India have to pay more on each and every import coming to its territory. So this is what is known as imported inflation. We are actually importing the inflated price of certain goods. And lastly, it will require the intervention of RBI to control the exchange issues. That is the reason why we have in the initial part of the article says that India is focusing on managed floating exchange rate. With this discussion please, now I will leave you with this question to practice. So read this question carefully. This will be your question number 2 and try to identify the correct answer and do comment in the comment box. Let us now move to the next article for the day. This article of the Hindu newspaper appeared on page 5th and talks about the recent protest which was lodged by the people of Manipur regarding the constructing proposal to make a certain environmental sensitive site of Keibul Lamjao National Park to be a heritage place. Now, central government and the tourist department was planning to bring some constructive work in and around the lake of Loktak in the state of Manipur, where we have the Keibul Lamjao National Park, in which brown-antled deer, also known as Sangai deer, also known by the name dancing deer, is found. And this deer is endangered. The lake is also under threat, and that is the reason why people were protesting the move taken by the central government in this regard. Members of 7 youth clubs from all walks of life, including the women activists who are living in the surrounding of Keibul Lamjao National Park, have shown up a protest to ensure that BJP-led government in the state does not shift the proposed heritage park from the government approved site. The Keibul Lamjao Park is a national park in the Bishnupur district of the state of Manipur, and it is the only floating park in the world. This is an important prelims pointer. Now in the prelims, UPSC has asked multiple times questions with respect to the national park, wildlife sanctuary, biosphere reserves, their location and their important relevance. So that is the reason why we have taken this article for today's discussion. So our discussion and entire focus will be on the Keibul Lamjao National Park. The location of the Keibul Lamjao National Park is in Manipur. The park is characterized by the floating, decomposed plant material locally called as fumdis. So fumdi is a decomposed plant material. It was created as a wildlife sanctuary in 1966 and upgraded to the national park in 1977. It is known to have a habitation of Elds deer, which is also the sangai. The park and the lake is very swampy. It is not very deep. It has a floating mass of vegetation that is known as fumdis. And on the eastern side of this park, we have Loktak Lake, which is a Ramsar site. 2/3 of this park has the area covered with fumdis. The lake provides source for irrigation, domestic use, wintering and the staging area for the water birds and especially the ducks. It also helps in controlling the flood in the area, and the area or the wetland is also included in the Montreux record to provide conservation. If you go through this image, you can easily see that this green vegetation, as you are seeing on the screen, is a decomposed floating vegetation, and this floating vegetation is known by the name fumdis. And in the same place we find the sangai deer. So let's read about this deer also. So as you can see, this is a sangai deer, which is also known by the name dancing deer and also the Elds deer. They are also known by the other names of thamin and brown antled deer. They are endangered in the IUCN's list and they are endemic to South Asian region. With this discussion placed, let us now move to the last article for the day. This article appeared on page 14 of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper and talks about India's report on current account deficit, which stands at 1.2% of India's GDP. Now the article says that India's current account deficit has increased from 0.9% to the GDP to 1.2% of the GDP in the last 1 year. And this is the reason why trade deficit has widened to $189 billion in the last 1 year. The reasons which were highlighted in the article and other reasons which were not mentioned in the article have been taken up for today's discussion. So these are the important factors which are responsible. Now, current account deficit, inflation, bank related terms and others are important for your prelim examination, and understanding their cause and effect relationship is important. So the factors which are responsible for the rising current account deficit in India are as follows. The first one is the rising import of crude oil, coal and fertilizer. Now, as you must have gone through that recently there was a coal crunch with respect to the power generation. Now, as India is also moving towards the wider expansion of agriculture production, so the demand of fertilizer is also rising. On the other hand, the ever rising of the automobile sector and the rising of the energy sector has also led to the rising of crude oil by India. All these three reasons have combined together to raise India's import bill. The second reason which was highlighted in the article is that India is now importing more of electronic products from outside the country. India's rupee has already been depreciating, that we have already discussed in one of the article today. So depreciating of Indian rupee has made imports more expensive than exports, and the current account has widened further. India is a country where marginal propensity to import, that is when the income is rising, what is the proportion of change in the import? So that is your marginal propensity to import. So whenever there is higher increase in the income, people will import more. So that is the reason why India is rising on the import bill also. India is also going through the higher per capita income, which is an obvious reason which increases the marginal propensity to import. Then India is a demand driven economy where demand is ever rising against the domestic supply. So we have to fulfill a demand from the imported products. India has also been shifting the import destination. So now we are importing more oil from Russia and other important countries than to the nearby countries such as Saudi and other West Asian oil powers. So when we are importing oil from other destination, it increases the transportation cost, and vis-a-vis it also increases the import bill. Second last would be that global uncertainty amid the war. As you know that Ukraine and Russia is on war, and supply shocks with respect to the food bill has raised the import cost for India. And lastly, that India's export growth on the merchandise trade has been quite limited and has been passive in the last 2-3 years. So exports have not taken a larger pace in the last 1 year. On the other hand, import has increased drastically. That is the reason why India's current account deficit has shifted from 0.9% to 1.2% of the GDP. Now, let's move ahead in this article and try to identify the important components of current account deficit. So these are the important component of current account deficit. Now, balance of payment has two important components. The first one being your current account, in which those items are included where transaction and exchange remains less than 1 year. Then we have the capital account, in which transactions and exchange remains more than a year. So in current account, we have two important divisions. The first one is visible, the second one is invisible. In visible, we have important goods, that is merchandise. In this, India is going through the deficit stage. On invisible, we have three important categories. The first one being services, followed by income and transfers. In service sector, we are at the surplus. So India has been exporting more services than what India is importing. On income front, we have earnings such as profit, interest and dividend. Here India is going through the deficit because of the large number of multinational corporations. Then we have the transfer payments. It includes the remittances, donations, scholarships, gifts and others. In this, India is in surplus stage, the most important one being the remittances coming to India. Now, apart from current account, other component of the balance of payment is the capital account, in which we have three categories. The first one being the investment, followed by loan and NRI account. In investment, we have foreign direct investment and foreign portfolio investment. Here India is on the surplus stage. Then we have the loans, where we have the sovereign borrowings and the commercial borrowings by different commercial entities. Here also India shows a quite higher level of surplus. And then we have NRI accounts or non-resident Indian accounts, which includes remittances, donations, gifts. Here also India is on the surplus stage. Now the point is, India's capital account shows overall a surplus status, and India's current account shows overall a deficit status. But the point is that current account has remained more vis-a-vis the capital account, and this is the reason why India shows overall negative balance of payment, which India has to balance with other accommodative accounts. Now, if we go through the past 10 years trend, you'll find that it was just a case of 2020 when India's deficit was minimum. Otherwise, India has reached even up to minus 5% of GDP with respect to its current account deficit. Now, these initial stages of 2011 to 12 was a phase of recession in India, where the inflation was extremely high, demand was low, India's export was low, but import were very high. So that was the reason, and that was the stage when India's current account deficit was at its lowest position. With this discussion placed, let us now move to the last part of today's discussion, that is question of the day. The answer to yesterday's question of the day was option C, that is all three important reasons are there to create floods in the state of Assam, which includes high rainfall, sedimentary nature of Himalayas and abrupt break in the slope. Today's question of the day is, which of the following items would fall under the current account of India's balance of payment? The first one is borrowing from European Central Bank. The second is import of cell phones from China. The third one is scholarship received by an Indian student from USA. And A car which was gifted from a Japanese person to his Indian friend. So identify the correct answer and do comment in the comment box. That's all for today's Daily News Simplified. Thank you.